All right, guys, what's up? We are back for a roundtable discussion. We're going to continue the topic that we started last month about essentially what to do when things go wrong. The next 4 videos of this series are all going to be about what to do during contest prep. We're going to start off with the biggest issue typically during contest prep, which we could talk about this for an hour. We're going to try to condense it down to the more important factors, and essentially what that is in detail is going to be what to do when you face a plateau, variables to consider as to why you face the plateau, and then essentially the best way to go about a process of elimination of, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to consider. So we're going to jump into this. We're all going to give our viewpoints. I want to talk from an experience standpoint with a lot of things because we all, as coaches, we deal with this every single day. Basically, what our job is on a simplistic level is just troubleshooting. And being able to assess within our experience when things go wrong, what to do. So let's jump into this, and we'll go from there.
I think the most important thing is whenever I start someone off with a prep, I mean, ideally you're working with them in the off season and you're going into a prep. But that's not always the case. So if you get someone that just jumps into a prep, the first thing is to develop. Him and I just did a lagging body part series. So standardization. You got to get them standardized so you can have like the least amount of variables so you can figure out what's actually happening and respond to. So when I first get someone, I'm going to just develop a baseline diet. It's just one diet. Maybe it's a little bit different on off days, but for the most part, it's one diet. I'm not doing, you're going to have this many carbs this day, that day. I'm trying to develop some kind of baseline. I usually don't have them even do cardio. I'll have them stop doing cardio if they're doing it, so I can get an idea of what's going on. Same thing with supplements and stuff like that. We'll have to take that into consideration, like what they've been using, and then go from there. But for me, number one, first thing to do is develop some kind of standardization so you can develop a baseline so you have something accurate to base changes off of.
I agree. I like that point. And something that I'll do too is, as well as setting up a baseline plan, because so many people that I have actually started working with recently, what I notice a trend in is under eating and then overeating or deviating from the plan. So they get their initial plan that has more calories than they're used to seeing on a normal day that they intend to follow. And they say, this is a lot more than I'm used to eating. This is less cardio than I'm used to doing.
Yeah.
But it's different because their scale looks like this during the week, and then they have their intake this high on the weekends, and then it's back here. So it's not something they can adhere to. And establishing something, this is a lot more popular among females, of course, but establishing something that they can adhere to and having that baseline just to see how they respond to that one single variable first before adjusting anything else is huge. And also, I like to pay attention to their environment, their workplace, if they're a stay-at-home mom, if they are a shift worker, like working nights in hospitals, like what does their routine look like? Because that's going to affect how this plan works too, and the stress that's involved in how they go about their plan. Is it someone who is on their feet all the time and can't take 5 minutes to chug some water and get a meal down? Do I need to have like several snack options in place as opposed to a bunch of meals? Because they can't sit? Or is it someone who has the time of the day to do all of that? And understanding kind of their system and their lifestyle helps me kind of gauge what to look for when I'm checking in with them in the future. If we're going for fat loss and they had maybe a sticky few weeks, are they more stressed at work? Are they working overtime at the hospital? Maybe something related to those regards, where you can kind of troubleshoot, not just based on solely the diet and cardio and the plan alone, but the environment outside of that, which in regards to hitting a plateau, I have personal experience with, because that's something that was, a struggle for us for a few weeks during my prep for nationals, was figuring out how to alleviate the environmental stressors and just control what I could while minimizing the effects that stress had on me, because personally that stress really wears heavily on me. It affects my sleep tremendously. It affects, even in my face, like I can see puffiness and swelling in my face when I'm agitated and stressed and not rested, and staying on top of everything. Like you could be doing your diet, cardio, supplements. Like you could be taking every single Revive product at very specific times of the day and eating your meals on the clock every 3 hours, whatever the case may be. But if, your environment is out of line and you are going through some kind of life stress or life event that's going to make a huge impact on how you respond to all these things, I mean, it's probably going to be harder to troubleshoot that if you're not asking about those things in the first place. So
you got to be up in their business.
Exactly. The first thing I do when I have a new inquiry is get on the phone with them and tell me about yourself. What does a day in the life of you look like, and what do you do, and how do you navigate about your day? Because that helps me help them more. And it's not nosy of me, because in the past, not knowing these factors and not communicating that to my coach in the past has led to over dieting, over restriction, overdoing cardio during a prep when it wasn't the plan that had faults. It was my environment, it was my stress and my way of handling it. And I just notice that the way I respond to that, the way I have some clients respond to those stressors, and maybe even if I could give them some kind of life advice and help them work through whatever they're going through. Well, given I'm not a therapist and none of us are, but our job is to help them, and we're going to do what we can there.
Yeah, but understanding all that stuff and just having that rapport with your client is extremely important, because them being comfortable to tell you that stuff. A lot of coaches are just so numbers based, and it's just X's and O's, and they don't even ask any of those other questions. And so therefore people don't feel comfortable of telling them maybe they just, you get those check-ins from people to where every week it's like everything was perfect like every week, and you kind of wonder, like, is it really? So like having that rapport just gets them to be comfortable to tell you. The other thing is I think there's a misconception when people say, you brought this, it made me think of this, like starting prep, like what does that actually mean? Like when do we start prep? If you've been working, like you work with people year round a lot, and so when people ask you, like, when do we start prep? I think people expect you to automatically, when prep starts, okay, you're doing 2 hours of cardio, we cut your carbs to whatever, no fat, you're training every day, we're going to throw in the trend, all the hardeners, like, and that's not the case. And maybe that's necessary sometimes, but for the most part, and that's why it's important to have time. That's why we want 16 weeks, 20 weeks, because then you have time to develop a baseline like I'm talking about. If you don't have time, like if someone comes to you in 12 weeks, you don't really have time to you don't have time to figure things out. Whereas if you're working with them all year long, it's kind of like, well, when does prep start? I mean, you've kind of been in it this whole time, but really what it means, I think, for most people is just cut out all of the bullshit foods, what is on your plan. When prep starts, what that means is you are 100% on everything, like clockwork. That's what starting prep means to me anyways.
So maybe to put it all together so it's kind of in a framework that's a little bit neater than the stories and all the details, I'd say there's a couple of steps. There's standardization, there's education, there's communication, there's accountability, and there's troubleshooting. And then that covers basically all of it.
Yeah.
You start from standardization, you make the plan. Education, you have to teach them what that plan actually means.
Yeah.
Now, for our plans, when we give them, like, we try to be as detailed as possible anyway. But really, when it comes down to it, people that aren't used to prep, they haven't done it for themselves before, or they've been with other people, need to have them educated on what exactly it means to hit the check boxes of all the things that are on the plan.
We got to set expectations for them so they know why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you get that established and they know what they're supposed to do, you communicate about whether or not they really are, and that creates the accountability, which is the following step. There has to be communication and watching out for what their communication is really like. They're over or under communicating, it'll tell you different things about what's going on. People will either over or under communicate based on whether or not they're really doing what they're supposed to do. Under communicating could mean that they're completely missing the mark, or they're going way overboard and they're doing more than they want you to know that they're doing so that they can please you with a result that they think that you want to have. And then that's a problem too.
Yeah.
That leads to another roadblock way further ahead.
Yeah.
So, and then beyond that point, with the accountability, you keep all the communications, accountability to what's really on the plan, educated and standardized for, then you troubleshoot beyond that point. Because then you've had it all established, they know what's going on, the plan is set, everything's been accounted for. Communication is there. You know what they're doing and not doing, and they're being honest about it.
Yeah.
And then you can make the changes to get them past the plateau. And then beyond that is all the details of how to do that based on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think just to kind of take a little bit of a different perspective on this, when an athlete hits a plateau during a contest prep, I think first and foremost, regardless of where you're at, you need to have patience. And that's why, for one reason, I like to start the prep so early. Because for me, the first month of prep should be a learning phase of the response of that individual.
Yes.
Specifically speaking to girls, I would say 9 out of 10 girls, when you start them in a deficit, they're really not going to change all that much the first month. It takes like a month of that consistent deficit to yield progress within that plan. Now, guys are different in the fact that you can make induce a change. Like, for example, with Matt, like, his weight is taking off very fast. So we're actually having to slow that down. And that's going to be another topic that we talk about here. But regardless of two different environments, for example, right now, Nadia's weight's moving really slow. Matt's weight's moving really fast. In both of those environments, the first 4 weeks for me, I'm just trying to have as much patience as possible, because I could overreact and then overfeed Matt, which would then stall out the fat loss, which we don't want, because there's a lot of fat right now on Matt, that what I like to call easy fat, where it comes off easy, and we don't want to slow that process, because it's not impacting his training. It's not impacting his ability to recover, but yet it's fat that needs to be gone. So let's get rid of it. In Nadia's situation, if I were to continue to pull based off of her lack of fat loss right now, when her body allowed that process to occur, we would have no food left. So basically, if every time she updated me, because of the fact that she wasn't changing, if I kept pulling and pulling, for one, she would associate a bad update with the fact that if I don't lose weight, I'm going to have food pulled. And two, within a month to 8 weeks time, then we're 12 weeks out, she's not going to have any food left to pull. So especially for girls, just really be patient. Again, guys, I want to encourage you that if you're working with a coach that truly cares about you, don't view that coach's lack of change as their lack of care. Because a good coach is going to also be a patient coach within the physique environment, because it's so important to allow our body to do what it's supposed to do. So we're going to wrap this one up. Next topic we're going to talk about, like I said, is we're going to go into what happens when things either go too fast, too slow, how to manage those environments, the best things to do. So stay tuned for the next episode.